In this episode, you'll learn how to properly manage a multi-person podcast recording so you can keep the fun banter and eliminate a lot of the wasted editing that you typically have to do. Welcome to Podcasting Q&A, where you learn the best tips and strategies to launch, grow, and monetize your show. This week's question comes from Jamie.
Hi guys, thanks for all the shows you're putting out, super helpful. Our podcast is called The Smash Quiz. It's 5 best mates in a room riffing off each other, and we're regularly praised for the jokes and the natural group chemistry. But during recordings, we interrupt, talk over each other, and have more than one conversation at a time, which is unsustainable, and it's an absolute nightmare to fix during editing. So other than practice and self-discipline, do you have any tips to keep us in check whilst maintaining the natural chemistry? Thanks a lot.
Thanks for your question, Jamie. Making a podcast that has multiple hosts is a lot of fun, but there are certainly some hurdles you have to overcome when you're managing multiple people all talking during an episode that you don't have to in a solo podcast. So in this episode, you'll learn how to manage that podcast recording process and also some tips for how to edit the final episode. First, let's talk about some best practices for when you're actually having the discussion and you're actually doing the recording. Jamie, you have 5 people on your podcast. So if you have all 5 people talking at once, it can be hard to understand. So the best practice for a multi-person podcast recording is no more than 2 people talking at a time. So at that level, it's more conversational. And if you're a listener, you can understand what's going on. Now, if you have 5 people on the podcast and 3 of them are cracking up in the background, that wouldn't really qualify. That's more of like a laugh track for a sitcom show. But you don't want 5 people all interjecting their ideas at the same time. You want some way to manage the conversation so that it flows in an intentional forward direction and that you don't have people constantly talking over each other. And that does take practice, but the best way to approach it is by learning to use nonverbal cues to communicate with one another, especially if you're in the same room recording together. This is going to be a lot easier. So you can lean back from the microphone when you're not talking, and then when you want to say something, you can lean into the microphone. Now, if 2 people start talking at the same time, one of you has to give up the baton to the other. This happens all the time in Buzzcast, by the way, where we record 3 to 4 people all at the same time. 2 people will jump in with their thoughts and start talking over each other. One person has to defer to the other person to start talking. Now, in the actual recording, we will say, okay, you go first and then I'll follow up. But then when we edit it, we take out that part. So when you're listening to the final episode, it just sounds like we have this really nice flow and chemistry and we can finish each other's sentences. But that's all done in the editing. That's not actually done in the recording process. So when you're recording, the important thing is to get a really clean, clear recording where people aren't talking over each other. Now let's talk about the gear that you should use. If you're recording multiple people on your podcast, there are some things to stay away from and some things to invest in. The first thing that you will want to do is make sure that every person speaking has their own Dynamic XLR microphone. So what does all that mean? A dynamic microphone is simply a kind of microphone that is very good at picking up the sound right in front of it and rejecting background noise. So this microphone right here, the pod mic that I'm speaking into, is a dynamic microphone. If somebody was having a conversation in the next room, this microphone would not pick it up. If you were using a condenser microphone, which is a very popular kind of microphone in music recording spaces, it's very good at picking up all the flavors of your voice, all the various frequencies, but it picks up a lot of ambient background noise. And so if you have lots of people talking in the same space, it's going to pick some of that up. But if you have dynamic microphones, it's going to be much better at isolating that one person who is speaking. And the reason you need an XLR microphone is that if you got the opposite, a USB microphone, which is the other way that you can connect a microphone to a recording device, it's notoriously difficult to record multiple USB microphones on the same computer. It can be done, but it's not super reliable, and there's a lot of ways that it can break. And so if you're consistently going to be recording with multiple people, instead you'll want to invest in an XLR microphone setup with an audio interface or recorder. So you can use something like a Scarlett recording device. You can get them from 2 microphone inputs all the way up to 8 microphone inputs and beyond. You can use something like the Rodecaster Pro, or if you're on the go and you need something portable, you can get something like the Zoom H6. All of those will record multiple XLR microphones and record them all on their own individual tracks. That's the last piece of the puzzle. Not only does every single person need their own microphone, but whatever device you're recording into needs to support multi-track recording. There are some mixers out there that typically are more on the budget side of things that even if they have 6 microphone inputs, they only give you 1 stereo track, which is going to make editing a little more difficult. Now let's jump into some editing tips. The first tip is to place every person's audio on its own track. So if you recorded 4 people in the podcast recording process, you'll want to create 4 tracks in your audio editing software, 1 for each person. The reason this is valuable is that if one person has a cough or if they're speaking softer than the rest of you, you can isolate that one person's recording and adjust it. So you can bring up the level to make it equal with everybody else's. You can cut out that cough so it doesn't distract or interrupt the rest of the podcast episode. It gives you a lot of flexibility for manipulating the audio to make it sound like you're all equally loud, and you can remove mistakes very easily. And then if you want to absolutely eliminate microphone bleed or spill, which is when somebody else's audio gets recorded in your microphone, then what I like to do is cut out sections of someone's audio when they aren't speaking. So we do this with Buzzcast where there will be 3 to 4 of us recording at the same time. And when one person is speaking, I will mute or delete the audio for the other 2 to 3 speakers. And the reason is that even with dynamic microphones, you're still going to get some level of bleed or spill. You're still going to get some level of ambient background noise, even though it's less than if you were using a condenser microphone like a Blue Yeti. It's still there. But if you mute it or delete it, then it's not. And it sounds like each of us are recording in our own little sound booth. Now, you don't want to get carried away with this early on in the edit process, because if you delete something and something shifts accidentally in the timeline, it can be difficult to line it back up to where it was. So I like to do this at the very end of the edit, but it's a really great way to further reduce the amount of spill or bleed that you're picking up in your podcast episode. Thank you so much for your question, Jamie. Now, if you have a question you'd like us to answer on a future episode of the show, just head over to speakpipe.com/Buzzsprout or click the link in the show notes and record a brief audio message. Podcasting Q&A is available in both video and audio formats. So if you like watching videos, make sure you subscribe to the Buzzsprout YouTube channel to get new videos every single week. And if you like listening to podcasts, Podcasting Q&A is available in your favorite app. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. And as always, keep podcasting.